community and health professionals that essentially want to serve our community. We want to share the good news of lifestyle medicine and whole food plant-based nutrition with anybody we can. I know every time I get talking with somebody, my wife always says he's pretty passionate about it, and she always feels bad for the people. And I always say, no, it's all right. I'm not forcing it on anybody. But needless to say, I do want to let everybody know today's topic is A Parent's Guide to Intuitive Eating by Dr. Yami Cazorla Lancaster. And she's really great. I'll go into more about her in a few minutes. But I do want to give you a heads up and a reminder for our upcoming presentations, which are going to be Monday, October 19th. We're going to have, Isabella's going to be doing a presentation on the end of mental illness. The subtext for that is how neuroscience is transforming psychiatry and helping prevent or reverse. Those are words we like. Absolutely. Prevent or reverse is the key. But this talks specifically about our brain health and our mental health. And then Wednesday, November 18th, we're going to be doing one, Your Body in Balance, the new science of food, hormones, and health. So I'll be doing that presentation for us all. That is very tailored towards the female crowd, as it deals a lot with women's health and a lot of women's health challenges, but also prevention in regards to that. Then we have another one on Monday, December 14th, which Isabella will be doing this one again. And this one's going to be called, or is called, the 31-Day Food Revolution. It's called Heal Your Body, Feel Great, and Transform Your World. Don't you love how they're always such good hooks when you think about the topics? I always think, if and when I write a book, I better have a good topic and a really good hook, a good catchphrase to draw people in. So needless to say, if you have any questions or information, you can always reach out to our team and check us out on our website at transformlm.org. So it's transformlm.org. All right, so let's dive into today's presentation. So this is the presentation for those of you that can still see me. Otherwise, you're just looking at the screen there. But it's based off of this book by Dr. Yami Cazorla Lancaster. And she's incredible. She is a pioneer in the space of lifestyle medicine, plant-based nutrition. And she has a lot of great, insightful information that I think will help all of us. I know it's helped me as I finished the book and was creating the presentation. And I hope it will also do the same with you. So today we're going to be talking about, ooh, I'm very sensitive here. We're going to talk about a couple of different things. So I'm going to introduce a little bit about, her, a little bit more, expanding off of that, then diving into why should we care? Why should you care? Why should I care? Why does this matter? All right, then we're going to dive into specifically how do we eat, what should we eat, how to set the table for healthy eating habits. And then I did go in there and put some specifics around how to go through and feed your child through the years. So for example, whether you have a 1-year-old, a 8-year-old, or 15-year-old, it's really important to understand that there's different generational things that are needed for the age of that child. So even for those of us that are young adults or slightly older adults or senior adults, no matter where we fall on the spectrum, healthy eating is healthy eating. But when you're going through the baby years, the childhood years, adolescent years, there's some situational things to keep in mind. So I'm going to share some of that. And just a reminder, this is not medical advice and solely the ideas and recommendations. You have to work with your own healthcare providers on. But what we're trying to do is share with you the good news about lifestyle medicine, the good news about plant-based nutrition. And when you think and you hear the word lifestyle medicine, understand that it goes into stress management, relationships, avoiding toxic substances, eating well, moving more, and stressing less. Those are the areas that really we build our Transform site around, but we really want to do and be able to support people in those areas. All right, so as I mentioned, Dr. Yami, as she calls herself all the time, Dr. Yami, she is an incredible woman, and this is the book here. If you're interested in getting more of the details, it's certainly available for you to check it out. So she is a pediatrician. So she's been working with children and families for years. So it's an interesting dynamic. Not only is she working with the children, but she's also working with families. So it's an interesting dynamic there. So as you know, pediatricians work with babies all the way up through teenagers. She has a really great site called dryami.com. She has this book that I'm sharing here, and she also has a really great podcast. And so whether you're a parent or just anybody, it's really a great podcast because it gets into everything from intuitive eating to exercise to healthy nutrition and a wide variety of topics and speakers. And it's really incredible. She just started her 4th season, and I believe she has over 120, 130 podcasts. So it's a really great offering, and it's free. So you can get it through any of the podcasts. So it's one of the things that I want to call out for you. She excuse me, she was a traditional pediatrician. And like a lot of us, she watched a documentary, she read a book, and she started learning about lifestyle medicine because most doctors aren't trained how to actually prevent, treat, and reverse. They're mostly trained to diagnose symptoms and treat with medications and procedures. So this is really a growing field, and it's emerging in so many areas, everything from family care to family care health to pediatricians to specialties. They're all starting to become more aware that this is a game changer. Okay, so when we think about how to eat, we might ask ourselves that all the time. How do we eat? What's the healthiest way to eat? How should we eat? You know, should we eat slow? Should we drink water with meals? Should we not? What should we do? Here's a quote I wanted to put in there just to help you understand, and I really want to call out here. It's not just for our children, but it's for ourselves. We want to tune into our own hunger and fullness cues and allow ourselves to have a comfortable relationship with food and avoid overeating. I'm sure we all can agree that we've overeaten. We've eaten mindlessly. We've eaten because we're stressed. We're eating because we're happy. We're eating because we're sad. We're eating just who knows why. But what we have to understand here is that we really have to get into understanding hunger and satiety. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But as we go through it, I want you to reflect and think, how do you eat? Are you eating in a car as you're driving from here to there? Are you sitting down with your family, having a relaxed, comfortable meal where you're engaging and really enjoying what you're eating? Are you eating in front of the TV? Are you eating really slow? Are you eating really fast? And just really kind of getting into the how. Oftentimes people hyper-focus on the what, but they don't always focus on how, all right? So this is something that we absolutely don't want to overlook. All right, so before we dive into that, I want to touch a little bit about why should we care? So why should we as adults care? Why should we care about this for our children? All right, so plainly put, excuse me, apologies. So it can contribute to our health and disease, and it can contribute positively or negatively to all of our health behaviors and outcomes, all right? So what's really important here is that the primary reason is that kids nowadays are starting to get adult problems, okay? Even things like metabolic syndrome, which is high insulin, erratic insulin levels, high glucose, high cholesterol. These are things that never were seen in children for the most part, but now we're seeing it more and more and more. Also, with the rise of type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes. Nowadays, it's just called type 2 diabetes because more and more kids are getting it. It's not referred to as adult onset diabetes. And then additionally, fatty liver disease. So people might think, oh, fatty liver disease, isn't that really like an alcoholic thing for alcohol consumption? There's fatty liver disease, and then there's non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So there's 2 different types. So obviously alcohol consumption is not good for our liver, but on the flip side, a high-fat diet, a high animal-based diet can also contribute to fatty liver as well. All right, so if you say why? Why should I care as a mother, as a father, as a sister, a brother, or even for myself? Number 1 is to promote health and well-being. We want to help children and ourselves feel genuinely good about our life. This is something that a lot of us that maybe had some challenges growing up, we might have to unlearn and relearn some things that we've experienced, okay? The second to that is decreasing our risk of chronic diseases and really supporting longevity, going through and really saying, I not only want to live long, but I want to live well, all right? We don't want to just live long. We don't want to make it to 80 and be sick for 30 years. We want to live to 80 and we want to thrive. We want to be able to live a high functioning life. We don't want to live 30, 40 years with chronic disease and on medications and afraid of heart attacks and strokes and things like that. Okay, so the key thing there is prevention, but also if you are currently dealing with challenges, it's to arrest and reverse. All right, most medical professionals will tell you, you have it, you can't get rid of it. I'll tell you that's not the truth. All right, you have the ability to heal your body. Your body wants to heal. Until every puff, every bite, every sip, every stressful moment, every drink, whatever it is, constantly dinging our body, and our body's saying, wait, let me heal, let me heal. So what we have to do is we have to get out of the way and allow our body to actually heal. All right, so when we go through and we look at the last one, this is something that's really important for ourselves and our families, is to foster confidence and develop a healthy relationship with food. I know for me, a lot of my life, I've struggled with this. I've tried at times to look at food as fuel and think, okay, it's just like putting gas in your car. You put it in, you use what you need, and you refill, okay? Food sometimes is a little bit different, okay? And it's not something like tobacco or alcohol that we'd say, that's it, I'm done, I'm not eating anymore, right? We can't do that. So what we have to do is we have to figure out how to have that healthy relationship with food. And that's kind of what we're going to go through today, all these different things here. Okay, so you might say, okay, well, what is intuitive eating? Okay, so we know the word mindful is basically focusing on what you're doing, when you're doing, and being aware of all the cues and all the items that you need to be aware of. So intuitive eating is basically where people respect their hunger, they recognize their hunger, they respect their fullness, and then they really enjoy eating. Because again, it's different than putting gas in a car in that we actually enjoy the act of eating. It's one of the great things in life. We enjoy the taste and the touch and all the sensations that come from eating. But what's really important here is there's two different things that we want to call out. There's a difference between appetite and hunger. All right? I really want you to get this. Appetite is psychological. Appetite is Lisa saying, I want chocolate. Okay. Hunger is France saying, man, my belly's rumbling. Like I haven't eaten all day. I need to eat some food. Okay. That's the difference. So that is physiological. So physiologically, our body's saying, feed me. I need food. Can we go without eating? Absolutely. But over time, your body's sending you signals, and that's hunger. Okay. Appetite is just saying, give it to me. I want more. I want this. I want that. And it's usually where cravings come in. Now, here's the kicker. The longer, if you allow yourself to go hungry, not go hungry a long time, but food tastes better. It's actually way more pleasurable. So if we allow ourselves to be hungry, the overall sensation of eating becomes even better. All right, because all the experts and everybody nowadays want to tell you, you need to eat 6 meals a day. All right, no, you don't. You just need to eat when you're hungry and respect your hunger in your satiety and go for the healthy food. So we want to focus on the what, the why, and the how collectively all together. Okay, so what's really important here is you got to understand and be aware of your signals. So when we're driving in the car or when we're eating in front of the TV, oftentimes we're not really focused on our signals because we're distracted. So essentially what's going on here is we're distracted and we're saying, I don't really know. I've been eating and I don't know why. This is an example of somebody opening a big bag of chips and they're just mindlessly eating as they're watching something. Okay, you're just eating, not necessarily because you're hungry. By the way, nobody reaches for chips when they're hungry. I don't know about you guys, but I've never been filled by chips. I've never been filled by, unhealthier food options that are, very airy and greasy. You can eat them essentially endlessly. And what's really good about intuitive eating is it sets you up for success. Again, focusing on the how to really promote your health and well-being, to decrease future risk and reverse any risk you have, but then also to really help you create that confident relationship with food day in and day out. So I guess I kind of jumped a little bit ahead here talking about hunger. But the difference between, or something that you guys need to understand is the definitions of hunger and satiety. So I already kind of shared this. hunger is a discomfort or weakness, basically saying, I need food, I'm hungry, I need to eat it, all right? So what we have to understand here is that satiety talks about the amount of food that's consumed. Okay, so imagine, put your hands together in like a circle like this, all right? A big circle. It probably looks like a big grapefruit or an orange. Okay, take them a little bit bigger. Okay, now consider my stomach's probably bigger. Obviously, I have bigger hands, bigger body, but needless to say, what we have to understand here is that we have our stomach. Okay, so now our stomach has two types of receptors. It has nutrient receptors and stretch receptors. You guys don't have to hold your hands anymore. Good thing I saw that, because I don't want you to 5 slides later be like, are we still doing our hands? Okay, so what I want you to understand here is that when it comes to our belly, we have two different receptors. We have hunger, we have stretch receptors and we have nutrient receptors. So the stretch receptors say, when you're full and when you've eaten enough food, they put pressure on the walls of your stomach. They send a signal to your brain saying, check, I've consumed enough food. My stomach is full, all right? So that's one thing. And then you have nutrient receptors. So imagine you fill it with just a whole big bowl of iceberg lettuce. What happens is your body needs a proportion of a lot of different types of nutrients. You also have nutrient receptors that says they've eaten enough fat, enough protein, enough carbohydrates. So I'm full and I have the nutrients I need. Check, check. All right, that's happening throughout the day. So what's really important here is that we have to understand when we look at high fiber foods, when we look at plant-based foods, they serve two great benefits. They fill your stomach while giving you a lot of low calorie dense options, all right? And they give you all the nutrients you need. However, again, the iceberg lettuce example, you might need to eat more things. So you might eat it and then it might fill you, but 20 minutes later, you're eating something because your body's saying, I need more nutrients. All right, so what we have to understand is those two go hand in hand. If you take oil and cheese and meats, things like that, you might take your stomach and it might only fill up the tiny bit at the bottom. So what we have to understand is we want to fill the belly with high fiber, plant-based foods for the most part. And we want to limit the high fat, high calorie dense foods. But we also need to make sure that it's a wide variety of plant options that are going to give you all the nutrients you need. All right, do you need to track your fat, protein, and carbohydrates? Absolutely not. You just need to make sure you're eating enough food and you're going to get everything that you need. All right, so what you have to understand too is intuitive eating, you have to understand too to tie into your feelings and how you feel after you eat a meal as well. Because we've all done it to where we eat something and we're like, oh, what the heck? And then we go to town and then later we're like nauseous and sick. And then we're mad at ourselves and we're like, why did I do that? I just wanted to eat one Oreo and I ate half the pack. Who eats 20 Oreos? Right? Guilty, been there, done that. We absolutely have those struggles. And we're going to get into that too, because a lot of those highly addictive foods, you know, a lot of these commercials have said, oh, bet you can't eat just one. They know you can't eat one. They know if you eat one, you're going to eat more because of the addictive components in those foods. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit here about body acceptance and body image and media for a little bit. So, excuse me. So what's really important is that body acceptance is really important. So I just want to call out a couple things here. And it's the notion of health at every size. Okay, now let me clarify here. This doesn't mean that if somebody's overweight or obese that you need to just accept that and say, oh, it's perfectly fine. That's not the case. What you have to understand here is you need to, instead of focusing on a scale and focusing on weight, we need to focus on healthy living first and foremost, all right? So we don't want to look at ourselves and say, oh, I'm 50 pounds overweight and we see just the weight. We need to fix and improve our lifestyles. So naturally we can say, even at the current weight I am, I can obtain a healthier lifestyle and I can get healthier where I am. And in time, as you continue those healthier lifestyles, you'll get to a healthy weight. But we need to remove the size and the body image and the challenges there, and we need to focus on healthy living. So that's the message to everybody out there that struggles with body image, is that you need to be confident in yourself wherever you are, but you have to focus on health instead of on size. All right. So if I'm working with somebody, I wouldn't say, okay, well, you're wonderful the way you are. Let's not lose the weight that you need to lose. I would never say that. I would say, let's get you there, but let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the healthier aspects and the healthier living aspects to get us where we want to be. So basically what goes into, excuse me, health at every size is weight inclusivity, health enhancement, respectful care, and eating well, and just kind of going through and enhancing your lifestyle. That's the goal of what we're striving to do. The children have a lot of challenges in this, in that they have so many pressures around them, but we also have the fact that children have to deal with us, the adults, and the parents. So oftentimes we are some of the most challenging things for kids. We affect their body image, we affect the pressure we put on them. But what we have to understand here too is that and we're going to get into this, but we want to avoid getting kids to eat more. And like when we go through different things, what we don't want to do is go through and start considering, oh, well, my son Johnny needs to go on a diet, so I'm going to give Johnny this special meal thing, and then I'm going to kind of go through and start working with him specifically on this. It needs to be a lifestyle way of changing and improving. So, I'm a family of 6. We go through, and we're not going to isolate one person and say we're doing this. We're going to say as a family we're making some changes or some improvements. But what we have to understand here is we need to avoid restricting foods and saying, this is all bad, or, never eat this, or, oh, you only get this small amount. We need to try to help them understand fullness and hunger and satiety and all the basic physiological and psychological things. But then also what we need to understand too is that we need to avoid emotional feeding. This is a big thing, and we've seen it all the time. I mean, nowadays parents are emotional beings, and they're challenged in so many ways. But essentially, they're going through and they're trying to use food as an advantage or a carrot to get somebody to, not a literal carrot, but using it as an incentive to do this or to do that. An example is, if you clean your room, I'll give you an extra piece of pie. Like, again, that's basically going through and it's doing some things with our psyche, but it's also going through and it's putting some of these negative foods on a pedestal. So we don't want to put these negative foods out there as, oh, this is the best thing ever. You only get it when you do good things, because we're creating a lot of challenges around that. So I want to give you 2 recommendations here on our naturally lean child, but naturally large child. And one thing is, your naturally lean child, you need to kind of feed them like an athlete, essentially. So bottom line, whether they're lean or larger, you need to make sure that the core concepts of what we're going to talk about today, with the what to eat, eating mostly whole, unprocessed, plant-based foods is the goal. But what we need to understand here is that we want to keep them on a regular schedule, and we need to make sure that we have meals and snacks regularly. We don't want to be skipping meals with the naturally lean children. Try not to be a short order cook that essentially every time they want something, you're like, oh, let me make this, let me make that. Like, they need to understand that they're allowed to go some time without eating, and they can't eat 24/7. They need to have some gaps in there as well. Never force any child to eat. This is something that she really calls out in the book a lot. Never force a child to eat. If you're not hungry, don't eat. If your child's not hungry, don't eat. It doesn't matter if you're skipping breakfast or lunch, or breakfast, lunch, dinner. It's not right. Like, for example, we're always trying to combat what our body's doing. So, for example, oh, okay, well, my belly's hurting, and we're jamming food in there because we feel like we need to eat, and we keep throwing up. Okay, that might be an example of stop eating, because what you're putting in is coming out. So try not to work against your body. Avoid teasing and nicknames. This is for both the lean child, but also the larger child. And then always stand up for your children, no matter what. This is basic parenting 101. You have a responsibility to your child to protect them in a lot of different ways. And part of that is being a support and an advocate for them as well. Now, for your larger child, so I can speak specifically for me. I went through many different stages in my life, and at different times, I was always an active kid, but depending on our family nutrition, I was larger than I wanted to be. But essentially what we need to shift away from body size and shape and focus on being healthy at the current size that they are. Not saying, oh, well, we need to get them to lose 15 pounds. What we need to do is address a healthier lifestyle and work from there. Again, be a role model. A lot of the things our kids learn is they learn from us. So wherever we are, whether we're parents or not, it's important that we get ourselves right prior to really trying to add value to them. So especially if you are a parent, or you will be someday, just keep in mind that they are always watching. And people might not remember what you say, but they will always see what you do. Okay, so what's really important here is that it's not just talking the talk, it's actually walking the walk as well. Help them learn to tune into their hunger and satiety. Be really patient. Be a role model. Don't ever shame or guilt them. And if you feel like they're having a lot more challenges with like binge eating and really kind of having a lot of challenges, understand that, you know, it's something that will take time, and you absolutely have to be patient and just focus on long term and what we need to do to help ourselves out. All right, so let's talk here a little bit about media. Media exposure is a big challenge. It's a big problem in our world. It's a big problem. I mean, if you look at our world now with COVID and with social challenges and this is not a time to be tuned into media. I know it affects my mood when there's things that I watch. Even if it's things I agree with, when I hear about things that I don't agree with, it's frustrating and it affects me. So what we have to understand here is that media, it's different than it used to be. And media it has a lot of hidden agendas, and it's got a lot of influences, and it's got a lot of things that they're trying to do to manipulate our minds, but also our children's minds. So we might be able to objectively look at media and be like, oh, that's nonsense. Our kids can't do that as well, all right? So it's important that we have those conversations when they're exposed to things, but what we have to do is we have to understand that it does have effects on our thoughts and behaviors. And they specifically target children. I mean, think about some of the worst, unhealthiest cereals are the ones with toys in it, are the ones they promote during kid shows and kid movies. And there's a reason they're specifically targeting the children. So when you take them to the store, they're saying, I want Trix. Trix are for kids. There's a fun little toy inside, all right? So bottom line, if anything comes with a bait or hook or toy, don't buy it for yourself or even your kids, all right? So what we have to understand here too is that a lot of studies have shown the more TV, the more media you consume, typically the worse your diet is. The more higher calorie foods, the more, you know, sugary beverages, snacking, and also, you know, eating longer into the day as well, kind of that mindless eating. So I'll never forget this. One time we took one of our kids to get blood work, and they were 1 year old. And the tech said, at Nemours said, what's your son's favorite show? I said, what? They said, what's his favorite show? I said, he's a baby. He's 1. And they were like, oh. And I'm thinking, what do you think? I'm sitting my 1 year old in front of the TV like, here, buddy, watch this. Okay, so what we have to understand here is under 2, the recommendation from the American Pediatric Society as well as Dr. Yami is do not expose kids to it. So even if you have a little 2-year-old in a walker, if the TV's on, try to make it so they can't see it, or turn them away, or just try to be mindful of that. Obviously, if they catch a couple glances and they're looking at it, it's not a big deal, but when they're literally glued to it and they can't look away, that's something that's not good developmentally for kids. Over 2, you can allow up to an hour of screen time. And then certainly as they age, it can get a little bit more. But we just have to be mindful that if kids are sleeping 10, 11, 12 hours a night and they're watching 5, 6 hours of TV a day, there's not really a lot of time for, you know, other things that they need to be out there playing and socializing and doing other things as well. Magazines I would avoid, and so would Dr. Yami. Avoid getting magazines that are about, you know, vanity and body image things. If you have these memberships yourself, they're not good for you. You might think that they're necessary or they're helpful. They have a lot of good tips. But they also, every time you look at them, they might be having some psychological effects on you as well. Social media, it's something that obviously We need to be really mindful. A good movie that just came out is The Social Dilemma that we were talking about earlier. This is something that we have to be aware that there's some challenges that come with that. The fact that somebody can write a post and get 50 likes, and then their friend goes and posts something and they get 0 likes. All of a sudden, Susie versus Janie, one of them feels really good and the other one doesn't feel quite so good. And I know we've all experienced this. We're triggered. There's a reason why liking and the hearts and the things are there, because we want them. People seek them. You know, people will write something and be like, let's see what I get. If they don't, they're upset. If they get certain comments, they get upset. So again, we just need to take it with a grain of salt and understand that less is more with social media. When it comes to advertisements, we do this with our families. We have a conversation around, see how they said that? See how they showed that commercial and they showed this or they showed that? We don't agree with that message. That is not a helpful option. And what they're talking about is X, Y, and Z. So it's a teachable moment, all right? So think of that. With different things with your kids, just understand that we have teachable moments there to help them. All right, so in regards to body image, and then we're gonna start to shift away from this for a little bit, but here's some things that are really important. And let me tell you this, it is incredibly important that A, we have a positive body image of ourselves, and B, we have a positive influence on others, especially young children. They need to have a positive body image. And unfortunately, they might not be getting it. They might not be getting it at school. They might not be getting it from you or from community or TV. So what we have to understand here is that we have to do some things. First and foremost is be a role model. Okay? Even if you're not a six-pack, you know, hard body running around looking like a cover of a magazine, that's not always attainable. That's not always realistic. What we have to understand is we have to love ourselves where we are. But again, focus on living a healthy lifestyle, but be positive about who we are. All right? Be aware of your own talk. What's really important here is we need to talk to ourselves like we're a friend. All right? Now think of some of the things that if your friend was struggling, you would be pretty encouraging. You would go through and say, you know, Isabella, you know, don't worry about that. You did this and it's okay. You wouldn't go through and be like, oh, Isabella, you're an idiot. You suck. Just give up. But again, then we do that to ourselves. So it's something that we need to consider, and we need to say, we need to be aware of our mindset and how we're speaking to ourselves as well. Avoid teasing children. No, nobody ever wants to hear, oh, you're the skinny one. Oh, you're skinny. Or oh, you're big man. Or you're this or you're that. Nobody likes teasing. You know, it's always at the expense of somebody else. So don't ever tease your own child, because a lot of times you have lasting implications on when you're doing it. All right, keep the lines of communication open. It's really important that not only we communicate effectively, but we connect about things like this, and we talk about where we are. Reassure your child that there's peaks and valleys as we grow. And as we grow into a young adult, that we're gonna have times where maybe we're a little bit more full, or maybe we're a little thinner, or whatever it might be, understanding that there's certain stages of life. And this is what pediatricians like Dr. Yami would say, is that there's a normal growth curve. And over time, you're going to see a natural progression of growth. You don't need to necessarily focus on the peaks and valleys, as long as over time they are growing to healthy adolescents and adults. Now, this is a big one, and this is really big for me, is remind your child that they have inherent worth and are loved, regardless of their body size, regardless of their physical characteristics. And again, this comes from a movie where I think it's Liar Liar with Jim Carrey, where the boy says to his dad, my teacher says that real beauty's on the inside. And he jokes and says, that's just something ugly people say. You know, and it's like funny little movie comment, you know, get people laugh. But bottom line, it's the truth. Who we are is most important than what we look like. All right, who we are and how we live and the type of person we are. So what we have to do is we have to instill that love and support with them and empower them. Let them know that they matter. This is a message that gets overlooked a lot with our young generation. Parents and families saying, you matter. All right, so show them that worth and reassure them of that worth. And always lead with love. Don't ever promote dieting. Don't ever really go through into restrictive practicing. Don't ever be like, well, Johnny, you know, you can't eat this, but your siblings can because you're a little heavier than them. Like again, that's not a good way to deal with eating with children. Talk about foods in terms of health and pleasure, not in terms of calories. All this talk, I mean, nowadays you have 7-year-olds saying, does that have enough protein? And it's like, oh my gosh, they shouldn't even know what the word protein is. They shouldn't even know what fat and carbohydrates and calories. We are way exposing our kids to things that they never should have. Think of our parents and our parents' parents. Do you think they were out there calorie counting? I mean, I'm sure they did their own craziness and different things. But again, we are so hyper focused on nutrients and focused on calories that we need to break away from that. The last thing you want is, you know, teenagers going through and counting all their calories to make sure they're hitting certain quotas. Like that's not a helpful way to intuitively eat. Focus on qualities other than appearance. We talked a little bit about that. Teach your kids to be critical of media and messages in our diet and culture. All right, so what's really important here is to kind of wrap up body image is if you feel trapped in your own negative cycle of body image and dieting and body image and dieting, what you have to understand is you have to heal yourself. So if you want to be able to really instill those values in your kids, you really need to do some internal work on yourself. And again, it's possible. A lot of the things we're talking about today, not only can we do ourselves, but we can go through and do it with our children. All right, so let's take a look here at the 5 pillars of healthy eating. All right, so this is a really important thing that we need to just really keep these in the back of our mind. All right, so number 1, like we talked about with intuitive eating, being able to be mindful and be aware of your hunger and satiety. Remember, we talked about hunger is the physiological need. Your body's saying, I need to consume food. Please feed me. Satiety is knowing when you've had enough. Like we talked about the example of our stomachs. When you've had enough, both nutrients and bulk, you know, when you fill the stretch receptors and the nutrient receptors, they send signals to our brain saying, that's good. I'm good. I have everything I need. All right. We need to recognize that and think, I'm good. And one thing that's really neat is the Blue Zones talks about the longest living, but also very healthy populations around the world. And what's really neat is they have this concept called Hara Hachi Bu, and essentially it means eat to your 80% full. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, I only know if I'm 80% full, if I went past that, then I can go back and think, well, I was 80% a while ago. But what we have to understand is here the concept of understanding satiety and understanding when you should stop. All right, number 2 is emphasize whole plant foods. All right, that's really important. Whole plant foods. Try to avoid, you know, all the processed and you know all the different animal-based, high dairy foods. We need to understand that the emphasis should be mostly on a whole food, plant-based diet. Keep in mind the longest lived, healthiest people around the world, and most of the research shows that the longest healthy living people, it's a diet centered around whole plant foods. All right, no matter what population, what generations, where they are, that's the staple, and that's a really important thing. All right, the third thing here is to establish a positive environment. What we need to understand here is that when we think of eating, it should be a healthy environment in which we eat. We should be surrounded around joy and satisfaction and healthful food and socialization, and it should be a really positive environment. All right, think of meal times at your house as an important social, you know, collective thing. And one of the things I read years ago was you should spend as much time eating as you do preparing it. So think about this. If it takes you 30 minutes to make a meal, do you really want to eat your meal in 2 minutes? It seems like a lot of work for 2 minutes of enjoyment. So try to have that general rule of thumb. Like literally, if you're sitting there with your friends, your family, your parents, your kids, tell them. Like sometimes our kids want to, and they're like, can I be excused? And we're like, no. And we tell them, hang out, sit back, relax. And what we try to encourage with them is that we go through and we focus on being mindful about the meal and having a positive, you know, environment in which we do it. Here's another thing that sometimes I struggle with is you need to be flexible. You need to be flexible with yourself. You want to have a little something or a little this or a little that, or you need to shift or do this one day, don't worry about it. Eating should not be a really stressful, challenging thing. It should be something that over time you're creating these healthy habits, but you also have to have a little bit of flexibility. You might say, oh, I didn't really have much time, so I did this and it was really quick and convenient and I used this today. Great. But what we have to understand is we're not trying to go for perfection. So flexibility goes a long way. And then lastly, we need to relax and have fun. It should be relaxing. It should be fun. Keep in mind that eating is one of the enjoyable aspects of life. Oftentimes, people, A, don't have a healthy relationship with food, and they don't always enjoy it as much as they can. So we have an opportunity here to really focus on how we can do that. And again, just try not to be perfect. The goal is progress, not perfection. All right, now let's jump ahead to the next component, the next area, which is what to eat. All right, you can see the quote here on the screen from Hippocrates: "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." This is huge here, and this information is not new information. Essentially, everything's kind of cyclic. It comes and goes, just like fashion. What was in style in the 50s is coming back, and it just kind of goes, and it's cyclical. What we have to understand here is that food should be our medicine. So before we're reaching for, ibuprofen or reaching for this, reaching for that, what we need to understand is what are the medicinal qualities we should be getting from our food. All right, so eating to thrive. So what's really important here is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen is the power plate. So essentially, this is what the longest living, healthiest people eat primarily as the bulk of their diet, all right? So research has proven around the world, people that live long but live well eat primarily from these areas. All right, so what you want to do is you want to focus on, like we said earlier, one of the pillars of healthy eating is focusing on consuming whole plant foods. All right, next is to focus on fruits. Okay, my rule for fruit, I always say this, is if you see fruit, eat it. All right, if you see it, if you want to eat it. A lot of times people will say to me, oh, I can't eat too many grapes, they have a lot of sugar. Oh, strawberries, too sweet, I can't eat them. No, eat them. Eat them, enjoy them, and make sure your kids are exposed to them. Make sure there's a lot of them available. Your counter should be filled with a bowl of fruit, should have, cut up chopped fruit in your refrigerator, frozen fruit in the freezer. The next thing is vegetables. We need to make sure that we have vegetables readily available. Whether they're fresh, whether they're frozen, we need to understand that vegetables are essentially, I always tell my kids, and this is a good thing to help with your kids, is to understand that you have the ability to almost have like superhuman powers. I always tell my kids, it's like when you eat these things, you naturally get stronger, you naturally get healthier. And we always do this thing where all of a sudden I'll eat some vegetables at dinner and then I start flexing my muscles and I'm like, oh man, see my muscles? And then all of a sudden they all grab a handful of kale or spinach and then they're like, Daddy, and they're showing their muscles. And it's something that's, again, it's a positive thing that is just kind of just by eating them ourselves and encouraging it, that it kind of works it in. So vegetables, any type of vegetable, all right, is available. The greens, all the colors, try to, anything you eat, whether it be fruit, grains, legumes, vegetables, you want to eat a lot of color. Color is an amazing thing for so many different reasons, but we get so many different nutrients and vitamins and minerals from all the different colors that we eat. The next one is whole grains. All right, now keyword here, whole grains. It's not grains. On the My Plate from the federal government, they recommend grains, and they say half of your grains should be whole. My recommendation is all or the majority should be whole. But again, the goal is not perfection. You want to eat grains that are whole for the most part. So examples of this would be if you're eating rice, you want to eat brown rice or black rice or a whole unprocessed rice over eating white rice. Okay, you can go and get brown jasmine rice or you can get white jasmine rice. One's been more processed, some fiber's been stripped away, so you want to try to eat the whole grains. Same thing goes with when you're eating whole wheat pasta or whole wheat flour versus refined white flour. Again, one's a little bit more whole. Both of those are processed foods, but essentially one has more fiber and is more whole than the other. So whatever it is, it's important to understand that whole grains is the desired aspect here. The next is legumes, and this refers to beans, peas, and lentils. And what's really unique here is that my plate, again, the federal recommendation from the government talks about protein. And we're going to talk about protein in a little bit, but protein is not a food. So you know how you go to a restaurant and they think it's all fun and savvy to say, oh, pick your protein. Again, it's nonsense. They're not picking your protein. You're picking a food that may or may not consume decent amounts of protein. All right, so they'll have the beans and they'll have the chicken and the beef, and they say pick your protein. There's a lot of misunderstanding around what that is. But again, the reason why the federal government says that is because they want you to think you have to eat meat and dairy and eggs and things like that. But again, looking at the longest lived people, you want to eat the legumes, so beans, peas, and lentils. So some of your kids might not be as super interested in beans, so just do like the tiny taste. Over time, just get them to taste it and taste it here or there. But what we do is, like, for example, 2 of our kids love beans, can eat them all the time. 2 of our kids don't. So those two kids, when we eat beans, they're eating edamame or soybeans, or they're eating peas or, you know, lentils or whatever that they would eat. So it's just a matter of, you know, having a little side dish. You know, you can have a bag of frozen peas that, all right, these kids are eating chickpeas, these kids are eating beans. It's a good way to, excuse me, to work that in. And another call out here is, again, focusing on just trying not to consume too much processed foods. All right, this is the example of, are potatoes healthy? Absolutely. When you turn them into chips and French fries, the value isn't there as much. All right, and all the items you see in a grocery store, it's filled with thousands and thousands of things. And what we have to understand here is the fewer the ingredients, typically the healthier it is for us if we're eating mostly plants. All right, so we want to try to be conscious of that. All right, one thing to call out here is when we think about protein and fiber. Okay, so again, I shared earlier that protein is not a food. Okay, fiber is not a food. But what's really important here, all this talk around protein, it's almost like these kids are being indoctrinated when they get to school. You gotta have milk for protein, you gotta have milk for calcium. You know, you have all this stuff being told to you, and these kids are getting nonsensical information. But bottom line, what we have to understand here, protein is a macronutrient. So there's 4 macronutrients. There's protein, fat, carbohydrates, and alcohol. Okay? What we have to understand here is that for every 1 gram of fat, it's 9 calories. Every 1 gram of carbohydrate or protein is 4 calories. Okay, 1 gram of alcohol is 7 calories. So again, if we're trying to eat lower calorie density, you don't need to consume any alcohol to be healthful. So that right there cuts out a lot of calories in grams from that. Fat is more than 2 times more potent than carbohydrates and protein. Okay, so if you're eating a high fat meal with lots of grams of fat, you're gonna get a lot more calories. It's higher calorie density. Okay, so what we have to understand here is that even things like vegetables and fruits and things like that, they have protein. People might say, oh, what? Like, there's calorie for calorie, there's more protein in broccoli and brown rice than there is in steak and potatoes or whatever, you know, just a big, huge steak. Calorie for calorie, it has more than enough protein that you need, okay? So what we have to understand here is we need to forget the word protein. Even if you're athletic, obviously, if you're athletic and you're gonna eat, and you're gonna need more energy and you're gonna need more food, the more food you eat, the more protein you get. So you don't need to supplement protein. You don't need protein for recovery. Trust me, I used to be a guy that would buy the $100 bag of protein once a month, and I would go through and put the scoops in after my workout. And I think, wow, what expensive waste of money, all right? So what we have to understand here is we need to shift the focus from protein to the word fiber, okay? No Americans are protein deficient. It's completely, extremely rare for any American that's consuming enough food to be protein deficient. However, the great majority of Americans are fiber deficient. They do not consume enough fiber at all, okay? So fiber is the key. All right, so what we have to understand here is that fiber keeps our belly moving. All right, stuff isn't supposed to sit in our belly for weeks. All right, we're not supposed to eat a piece of chicken. It's going to sit in there, slowly but surely moving its way down, and then all of a sudden, a week and a half later, it's coming out. All right. You want your food to go in. You want your body to take what it needs as it metabolizes it and digests it, and you want it gone. All right. So here's a little stat that I heard years ago was the average vegetarian, their food is from their mouth out with 3 to 4 days. Okay. The average meat eater, dairy eater, sometimes it could take up to 10 days from swallow to passing. Okay, so think about it. When you're thinking about it, you want stuff to come in and you want stuff to go out. But what's really great is that fiber keeps you regular. It removes a lot of toxins and hormones. It removes a lot of cholesterol. And it also contributes to satiety. Remember, we talked about our stomach? Do your circle, but you don't have to hold it. You want to fill that. And the key thing is you fill that with fiber. Okay, write a big F in that bowel, in that stomach. Fill that with fiber. That's what we want to do. Fiber comes from plants. It's the only place that it comes from. Okay, so you need to eat plants to eat fiber. And then not only that, it's incredible for the gut bacteria and overall all the cells within our intestines. All right, so there's a couple ways to incorporate a plant-centered diet if you don't already do this. All right, obviously there is the all-in. Jump all in. You know, myself and my family, we jumped all in about 3.5 years ago and we never looked back. We ripped off the Band-Aid. Not everybody's like us. Not everybody's gonna do that or wants to do that. So, excuse me, a couple of options here is to focus on like meatless Monday. You know, it's kind of like a catchphrase. A lot of people say, oh, do meatless Monday. It's kind of something they're trying to do in some schools and things like that. It's a good way to ease in to say, let's just try it out. Go through and just pick one day a week where you don't eat any dairy or meat or eggs. All right, you might say, okay, I'm going to be meatless Monday and Wednesday. Those are my days. You might then go through and take it one step further and say, during the week, I'm not going to eat any meat. But when I go out on the weekend, I'm going to have a steak, or I'm going to have this, or I'm going to have that. I'm going to eat, you know, chicken and ice cream. Again, you might pick that, and that might be okay with you and okay for you. And then here's another one that they call it the vegan before 6. So essentially during the day, you eat plant-based. And then at night, if you have a little bit of meat, dairy, or eggs, then that's another variation. All right, so whatever it is, what we have to understand is where are we now and how can we shift towards a more plant-centered diet? All right, it's not perfection. You know, it's not something that you have to be all or nothing. You know, I'm not gonna judge you if you're at a barbecue and you're like, I want some of that cheese. Eat a piece of cheese. Your belly might hurt later, but again, eat it if you want to eat it, enjoy it, you know. But needless to say, what you have to understand here is that there's different ways to incorporate more in. So let's talk specific to some excuse me, to some meals. So breakfast, one of our favorites is oatmeal. So we do a lot of variations with oatmeal. We do oat groats, which is whole oats. We do it in a crock pot. We get them from Newark Natural Foods in Newark Shopping Center, and we go through and we put them in the crock pot. I put them in before bed, and then wake up and we have our oatmeal. We get our frozen fruit out and our bananas, and we cut it all up. We put some flaxseed, chia seed. For the kids, we pour maple syrup on it, and it's a great way to start your day off. You also can have things that are called fruity roll-ups. So essentially you go through and you take a whole wheat tortilla and you put some peanut butter and some fruits and some different things in there. You roll it up. It's kind of a fun little thing to do. You can have whole grain cereals. So
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Fatu.
Is there any way I can have this slide?
Yes, I'm going to email all the slides out.
Thank you.
And I also have a handout that I'm going to share with you guys as well. So I'm going to send out a handout as well as all the slides. All right, so one thing that I would recommend is with your cereals, especially for kids, there's a guy, Brian Swansig, that we saw this from in a movie or documentary where he basically has the generic cereal boxes, you know, the big plastic tubs. And so we got a couple of them and we go through and buy the whole grain cereals and we mix them all in. So essentially when we buy cereal, I'll buy like 10 excuse me, 10 boxes of cereal or whatever, a bunch of variety. And it will have some Cheerios. It will have some shredded wheat. It will have some grape nuts. We'll have some bran flakes. We'll have some, let's see what else. Puffed wheat, you know, Chex cereal, like some different things. And we mix it all in, and then we shake it all up. We shake it all around. And then the thing is, our kids aren't focused on the boxes and the marketing and the media, and they're not looking at the calories and the fat and the ingredients. Literally, we're just pouring it, and we pour the milk, and we do our thing. All right, so that's something I would definitely recommend. We've been doing that for a little bit now, and we really enjoy that. You can get them online at Amazon or any of the kitchen stores, and it's really a nice way. You just do the initial mixing, and then it lasts for a little bit of time, and then you update it. Simple things like avocado toast with tomatoes. Having a green smoothie, typically the greener the better. So typically when you're doing a green smoothie, a woman that we've read some of her stuff and follow, her name's Brooke Goldner, and she does a lot with autoimmune, and she says, fill the blender 3/4 of the way with greens, and then add the water, then add the other things. But bottom line, when you have a green smoothie, don't think of it as all fruit with a little pinch of spinach. Think of it as all spinach with some fruit in it. All right, so flip it a little bit so the ratio is even healthier. All right, lunch. Don't these pictures look good? They make me hungry. So peanut butter and jelly, right? Bottom line, go with the classic. Good old PB&J. I haven't met many people that don't like that. There's all kinds of different flavored jellies out there. You can get them, the more natural, the better. You can also get peanut butter without oil in it as well, and with lower sugars and things like that in it. You can have a bagel sandwich, kind of loaded up. People oftentimes say to me, what do you put on your sandwiches? And I'm like, same things you put. I just hold the ham and cheese. And I'll add the hummus or add the avocados or add whatever else into it. So what's really important here is that you need to focus on, basically, you're putting like a salad on a bun. All right, whatever bun you have, basically jam it with a whole bunch of stuff and then put it all on there and then go to town. We have this rule that when we say grace, if somebody's already holding their food, they don't have to put their food down. So if they have like a giant burrito or a giant sandwich, we're like, you don't have to put it down, just say your prayer with it, right? And they'll be like, God is good. Like it's kind of funny to think about it because it's so big and it's all gonna fall apart. Have a big sandwich, but load it up with lots of vegetables and tomatoes and all kinds of good stuff. When in doubt, you can't go wrong with a burrito. Load it up. Bean burrito, you can have all kinds of different things. We sneak it in with our kids. Sometimes if we blend it into things, they don't know. So like, for example, our non-bean eaters, we'll blend it into some sort of sauce and then we'll put that on the burritos. They don't know that it's even beans that they're eating. So even sometimes you can trick yourself. You can take black beans and salsa, for example, and blend it together and work it into something. Or you can take and smash things if you don't like the texture as well. Things like veggie, corn tacos with all kinds of stuff. Excuse me, all kinds of soups. I know we just had yesterday squash soup. That was really good, and pea soup. So we had 2 different soups, and it was just so good. We had over some brown rice, topped with a little bit of hot sauce, and you know, especially for the fall time, it's a really enjoyable thing. All right, now dinner. Basically, and again, keep in mind, you can eat anything at any meal. If you want to eat soup for breakfast, eat soup for breakfast. If you want to eat cereal for dinner, eat cereal for dinner. It's purely marketing that makes you think you need to eat certain foods at certain times. So just understand that you can eat anything you want whenever you want. You all are grown people and you can make that choice for yourself. All right, but one thing that's really funny is that no matter what you eat for breakfast, when you do breakfast for dinner, if you say, what'd you eat for dinner? People say, I ate breakfast for dinner. I always thought that was comical that people say that. Like instead of being like, we had eggs and sausage or we had pancakes, you'd say, we had breakfast for dinner. And it's just so funny because my whole life, whenever we had breakfast for dinner, I'd always say that. And it just, anyway, side note. Okay, so bottom line, you can load it up with all the whole grain pastas and replace the meat sauces, load it up with veggie or tofu or different things, load it up into that and basically thicken your sauce however you want. Okay, go through and think of all kinds of, you know, any type of bean. The thing I try to remember is try to think a green, a bean, and a grain. A green, a bean, and a grain. That's a good start for any meal. A green, a bean, and a grain. The average American does not eat very many beans at all. But if you start incorporating beans into your daily diet, your belly's going to move a little faster. It's going to rumble a little bit at the beginning. Just be conscious and understand that over time, your belly's going to be used to having more fiber. Even initially, if you move to a plant-based diet, you might be a little bit more regular, more frequent. Once your body adjusts, typically that's going to slow down and you're not going to be going any more regular than before. You can have the veggie burgers and the veggie pizzas and the veggie soups and the veggie sushis, and essentially you can do any of that. We like to cycle. We'll do pasta. One of our go-tos is, rice bowls where we're doing brown rice with tofu and any type of veggies and toppings. We like to make our own sushi at home. We like to go through and do Mexican anything. We love Indian dishes, things like chana masala, all kinds of different soups and things like that. And here's another thing, talking about making it fun and being social. Next time you cook like an Italian or a Mexican or Asian meal, whatever it is, get your phone or get your computer and type in like Mexican dinner music or type in like Asian dinner music. And your family's gonna think you're funny and they're gonna get a kick out of it. But bottom line, it's really fun. And we started doing this, months back. And then I was telling my oldest sister, I said, we love doing, like, we'll eat Mexican food and we'll play Mexican dinner music and they'll be like playing the banjo and different things. And then my sister said, we just started doing that too. So it's a fun thing. Maybe it's a theme that's going to catch on, but it really helps you understand and appreciate the environment you have, and it makes it a lot more social as well. All right, snacks. So snacks, first and foremost, if you're not hungry, don't eat. Don't be like, it's 10 o'clock, I need my snack. All right, you don't have to worry about that. If you're not hungry, don't eat. If you don't want to eat breakfast one day, don't eat breakfast. If you skip lunch, skip lunch. Don't be hyper-focused on eating more and more frequent. However, if you want to, or you're hungry, or you enjoy snacks, incorporate some healthful snacks. Okay, so when in doubt, you can't go wrong with any fruit as a good snack. Fruit is incredible. It's sweet. I try to tell people it's like God's candy. It's the natural candy that God gave us before all these candy companies came around. All right, it's the sweetness that we need. Excuse me. We go through and let's say we eat a bunch of soup and then we have some time and then, you're drinking some water or some tea and you're having some grapes or some strawberries. Like, that's a very tasty thing. When you eat this highly concentrated, highly processed food, fruit might not taste as good. But when you work that stuff out of your lifestyle, the fruit and the natural things start to come back and taste way better. Cut up veggies, especially for kids, you want to cut them up into fun shapes and sizes. So you see the picture there where it says veggies and hummus. It might take a little bit of time prep-wise, but it has an appealing effect on kids. Like, again, some kids might like the big, huge tomato and say, what's up, doc? And start eating the big, I'm sorry, I think I said potato, big carrot. But what you want to understand here is when you dice them and you slice them and you do some things and cut them in fun shapes, what you're going to notice here is that it actually is a lot more desirable for you and for them as well. Things like crispy roasted chickpeas. Just take a can of chickpeas, rinse them off, drain them a little bit, and then put them on a baking sheet. Put some garlic on it, some salt and pepper. Roast them in the oven for 45 minutes or so. Get nice and crispy. Put them in a tub whenever you want a little snack. You can eat some chickpeas. Things like trail mix. Just be careful with some of the trail mixes and dried fruits. If you're currently looking to get a little leaner, keep in mind that nuts and dried fruits are very healthful, but they are very calorie dense. So if we're eating 200-300 calories with a trail mix here, 200-300 calories with a trail mix here, before you know it, you might be consuming a little bit more than you may need. And then leftovers. Anytime you have a little bit of leftovers, just grab a little bit. It doesn't have to be like a snack food. All right, so bottom line, you can incorporate so many different things into your snacks. All right, so let's talk a little bit about a couple different nutrients of concern. Now, these nutrients of concern are really concerns for all Americans, and some tips and tools for you as we focus on a plant-based diet. Excuse me. All right, so one thing that you have to understand is when we consider the standard American diet, that acronym also stands for SAD, SAD. The standard American diet, unfortunately, is very sad. It is mostly highly processed, very high in animal-based foods, very high in oils and fats, and very low in the healthful plant-based foods. Recent research shows that 7% of Americans' calories come from vegetables and fruits. 7%. All right, that means 93% comes from animal-based and processed foods. All right, of that 7%, about 4 or 5% of that was from potatoes. Now, do you think that came from baked potatoes, or do you think that came from chips and French fries? All right, so what we have to understand here is the American diet is devoid of a lot of good things that we need. Needless to say, when we start centering our diet around a plant-based plate, we start to get more of the things we need. All right, so now one of the things that's important here when we talk about iron is that iron is a double-edged sword. If you consume too much, you have toxic amounts of iron, so you'll be iron toxicity. If you have too little iron, you have anemia. Okay, so what you have to understand is there's a certain amount of iron that you need to consume. So what I want you to understand here is that there's two different types of iron. There's one called heme iron that comes from animals. All right, this is why they always told you, oh, you need to eat red meat for iron, because it was high in iron. That was always like a marketing thing back in the day. All right, yes, it has iron, but here's what you need to understand. Heme iron, your body can't regulate. Heme iron, when consumed, your body can't say, thank you, I've had enough. Okay, so it's easy to create and consume toxic amounts of iron. Non-heme iron comes from plants. All right, non-heme iron comes from plants. Your body has the ability to say, all right, I'm consuming a whole bunch of beans and vegetables. Okay, I got all the iron I currently need. I don't need anymore, and it can discard the rest. So see the beauty in that? You don't have to worry about when you consume iron through your plant-based foods, you get what you need and your body says, no, thank you, I don't need any more. But if you have heme iron, it's like a bully. It just barges its way in and says, we're staying. All right, but you can't regulate it. So non-heme iron is unhealthy and heme iron is healthy. So it's important to understand your sources of iron are really good here too. But what we have to understand is that you can get iron through legumes, beans, peas, lentils, leafy greens, whole grains, and from other foods. But what's really important here to understand is that there's other foods that help you absorb certain vitamins and minerals. And one is having vitamin C. So when you consume vitamin C through your fruits and your vegetables and or supplementation if needed, when you have those things collectively with your meals, they naturally help you absorb the iron that you need. Now, this is also a nutrient of concern for women, being that when women are going through their cycle, due to blood loss, women will lose a lot of iron as well. Okay, so what we have to understand here is if you're eating the non-heme iron and eating enough of it, and or the slight supplementation or minor supplementation if needed, what you'll notice is your body gets all the iron it needs, even though you're having blood loss. One thing to call out too is when you think about brain health, if you have toxic amounts of things like iron and copper and aluminum and high fat, they are all what's found in beta amyloid plaques. So when it comes to things like Alzheimer's and dementia, we don't want to overconsume metals because they're found to be in these beta amyloid plaques within our brain cells. All right, so again, you got to be mindful of the amount of metals that you consume. All right, next thing is calcium. Okay, so key, excuse me, key point here is it's not COWCIUM. It is calcium. You don't need a cow to get calcium, okay? It's all marketing. It's purely marketing. Vitamin D and calcium from your milk. You need it for those two things, and it's kind of sold every which way. What we have to understand is calcium is a mineral. The only reason why cows get calcium is because they eat it, all right? They eat it from the dirty ground that they eat grass from, all right? So what we have to understand here is that calcium is essential. We need it as well as vitamin D for so many helpful reasons. But what we have to understand here is that you don't need milk for calcium, all right? And we'll talk about dairy here in a quick minute, but calcium is in whole plant-based foods, all right? So it's in a lot of plant-based foods. And it's really important to understand that not only do you need calcium, but the way to really build strong bones and maintain strong bones is through physical activity and exercise. All right, so it's not just a matter of getting the calcium and sitting on your couch all day. You need to use your bodies. So in order for me to work my muscle, I have to use my muscle. In order for me to strengthen my legs, I have to put weight on my legs. So we need weight-bearing activity for all of our muscles and joints and bones as well. There's a lot of plant foods that are very highly absorbable. You can see the list there from a variety of leafy greens, beans, and other things like, almond butters, tahinis, molasses, different things there. Okay, so one thing to call out is there's so much. I almost did a whole slide on dairy, but basically dairy does way more harm than good. Dairy is not necessary. If you have any doubt that we should consume dairy, just consider, do we have a big tail? Do we have big floppy ears? Are we 600 pounds? All right. What we have to understand here is that we're not cows. We have to think about cow's milk of a mother cow is designed for who? It's designed for a baby calf. It's not designed for little Johnny, 2-year-old, as he's weaned off his mother's milk. It's not designed for us. It's very high in IGF-1, which is growth factors. It's very high in hormones, and it's very high in saturated fat. So what we have to understand here is it's not for us. We're the only species that has the audacity to wean off of our own mother's milk and be given another species' milk. Have any of you ever had monkey milk, zebra milk, tiger milk, rat milk? No, you guys haven't had that? Why not? Because you're not a rat, you're not a tiger, you're not a monkey. It doesn't make sense, all right? So what we have to understand here is that it doesn't do us any good, but here's some of the bad things. It's linked to type 1 diabetes in babies, okay? This dairy protein gets inside the pancreas. The pancreas gets attacked because it's found to have these dairy proteins. It attacks it. It decreases the ability to produce insulin. It attacks itself. It also causes bloody stools, which is in babies because their belly's not designed to handle it. It also causes all kinds of issues from anemia to constipation to abdominal pain. The great majority of Americans are lactose intolerant. Bloody stools, acne, menstrual pain, autoimmune conditions, arthritis. Again, milk does the body good? I don't think so. All right. Again, it's purely marketing. You don't need these things. Dairy is not your friend. And I'm, excuse me, and I feel bad because our pediatrician was not Dr. Yami. Unfortunately, our pediatricians have told us when we weaned our kids off of breast milk that they need cow's milk, and we pumped them. We pumped them full of it. And I'm sad about it because our kids had some breathing challenges and they had different issues and challenges. And I think it was all because of us jamming milk down their throat. All right, let's go next to a few supplements and a few other vitamins. So what we have to understand here is you can't take poor nutrition and fix it with vitamin supplementation. So how many people think that they're getting all the vitamins or minerals through their medicine cabinet instead of through their food? It's misguided thinking. So you can take the vitamin shops and the GNCs and you can close them all down. You can basically dwindle it down to only a few things. And it's basically a few things that you might need to supplement, okay? So one thing is B12. B12 is a deficiency in a lot of Americans, not just vegetarians and vegans, but also a lot of meat eaters. The average adult is low in B12. So what's really important here is that we want to take a supplement for this. No matter where we are, every single one of us should be supplementing B12. All right, we personally take a 2,500, excuse me, 2,500 microgram every week. So once a week, we'll take that little thing, we'll chew it, and it's absorbed through your body, and you get what you need. Vitamin D, again, vitamin D is added to cow's milk. So it's fortified with vitamin D. Again, just so they can say you need milk for vitamin D. All right, you don't need milk. Keep in mind, you can get vitamin D from the sun. It's actually a hormone. Vitamin D is a hormone that's produced when sunlight hits our body. All right, but we can also get it in supplement format. And vitamin B12 and vitamin D, if you do need a supplement, if you do have a little more than you may need, it's not toxic. So you don't have to be concerned if you have a little bit extra vitamin D in your body or a little bit of extra B12. It's not toxic. Omega-3 fatty acids and multivitamins. So omega-3 fatty acids, a lot of times people will say, well, I'm supposed to eat fish for omega-3 fatty acids. And the thing is, no, again, it's the power of marketing. Are there fatty acids that are healthful in fish? Absolutely. But you know what? That's about a third of it. The other 2/3 are filled with not good fatty acids, which are omega-6 fatty acids, as well as saturated fat and other forms of fat as well. So what we have to understand here is the best way to get our omega-3s are things like flax seeds and nuts and chia seeds and hemp seeds. Also in things like leafy greens and, you know, other things that like algae oil and foods that come from like algae or come from like seaweed, like the sushi paper. I always forget what that's called. The sushi paper that you roll up.
Nori.
Nori, right? Yeah. Stuff like that. Like my kids eat it like it's a cracker. And it grosses me out because I personally don't like it. I mean, I'll eat a little bit, but I think it just makes the whole thing taste like fish, which to me, I don't really want to taste fish if I don't eat fish. But needless to say, it is healthful. But my kids love it. I watch them with this big sheet of paper eating it, and it looks comical. Needless to say, you can get all the omega-3s there that you need. So here's something to keep in mind when you eat the high animal-based fats. They're full with omega-6s. Think of it like musical chairs. The more omega-6s you have and the less omega-3s, it's like musical chairs. They're in your body, and the omega-6s crowd out the omega-3s. So when you have too many omega-6s, it crowds out the omega-3s, so you can't absorb them and use them. Multivitamins. It can't hurt to have a general multivitamin because it has a variety of different things. It has B12, it has vitamin D, has different DHA, fatty acids, things that are incorporated. So some brands here that you might want to look into. Dr. Joel Fuhrman has a line of different vitamins that I know we've purchased some of them through the years. So it can't hurt you to have a general multivitamin. Just be careful that, you know, doesn't have things in it or toxic amounts of anything that you don't need. All right. The next thing that I'm going to go to here, and then I'm going to kind of have a send off with the other items, but I want to talk about setting the table for healthy eating habits. And there's 3 primary areas that we, as people, or we as parents need to really emphasize for ourselves, but also for our children. And one of them is sleep. I say this all the time. The best way to have a good tomorrow is a good night's sleep tonight. We need sleep. We need 7 to 9 hours nightly. All right. Not only is our body restoring at night, it's repairing and it's energizing. So 3 words that I want you to think about when you get sufficient sleep: restoring, repairing, and energizing. So when you say no thanks to sleep, you're saying, nah, I don't care about those things. All right. So what we have to understand is our body heal. We need it. Kids need sleep. All right. No matter whether they're 1 or they're 5 or they're 15, you need an adequate amount of sleep. Obviously, it's front loaded. The younger children are, the more they need to be sleeping. All right. And think about it, in this whole scheme of our life, the entire pathway, we're going to sleep about a third of our life. Right. So we all want to live to 100. We're talking about 33 years of sleep. That's pretty crazy. Take a minute and let that sink in. 33 years means we need it, all right? So I always think like this. If you want the 2/3 while you're awake to be good, make sure the 1/3 is good too, all right? Okay, so some tips on sleep. Have a regular schedule. Try to have the same sleep. Go to bedtime, wake up time. Try to be consistent. You know, if you're going to bed every night at 11 and waking up every night at 7, try to keep consistent even on weekends. You don't want to be a weekend warrior and be like, I'm staying up till 2 a.m. and then you still wake up at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and then your sleep schedule is all off. Try to keep consistency there. Get exposure to sunlight during the day. Make sure that your kids are getting physical activity. A lot of times mentally we might be tired, but physically if we haven't moved, physically our bodies aren't tired. So think of the dog that you want to lay down and rest. You got to walk them. You can't just be like, oh, go sit down, Piper. You know, I don't know. It's just the dog name that came to my mind. Go sit down, Fluffy. Like again, they need to play. They need to move. All right. So what we have to understand here is that we need to move our bodies just the same. Avoid eating heavy meals before bedtime. It kind of fills us and our body's digested. Typically, if you do eat later in the night before bed, higher carbohydrate food, the better. A doctor that does a lot of sleep research, Dr. Neil Bernard, often says that, you know, consume high carbohydrates right before, whether it's popcorn or even a piece of bread, things like that. Kind of kick the old thing to the curb where people would drink a glass of warm milk before bed. It's actually the opposite, okay? You don't eat a high-fat meal right before going to bed, a high-protein, high-fat meal. Start turning off the lights. Go around in the evening and turn all the lights off. Turn them all off. And then say this cheesy thing to yourself. I'm increasing my melatonin. I'm increasing my melatonin. I'm increasing. Every time you turn the lights down naturally, and I say this, my wife laughs at me, but basically, when you turn the lights down, you're naturally going to produce melatonin that's getting you more sleepy and more restful. So our house should not look like a hospital in the evening. Our houses should look calm and quiet, and they should be soothing. All right, let's jump ahead to the next thing, stress. We need to manage our stress. We can't run from it. If it's important and controllable, we take action. If it's important but uncontrollable, we accept and we cope positively. Our kids, unfortunately, have a lot of stress put on them. Some of it from us, some of it themselves, some of it from school and friends and media and TV. What we have to help them understand is that stress can also be a good thing. A little bit of stress is a good thing. When you stress a muscle, it gets stronger. When you walk a little faster, your heart gets and your lungs get better. All right? Stress is a good thing to a point, but it has to be a good balance of how much we're exposing ourselves to and how we're dealing with it effectively. And one of the things that I really want to point out here is that oftentimes when we have a very high stress, high fast-paced environment, typically we're leading kids to seek out foods that are higher in fat, sugar, and salt. All right, some stress tips. First and foremost, validate all emotions, and this isn't just with kids. Validate any emotions that you're feeling or your friends or your family are feeling as well. When they're sad, let them be sad. Talk to them about it. Let them know that that's normal. All right, you don't want to be like, oh, stop being sad. In this house, we don't cry. I'm like, no, cry. Be happy, be sad, express those emotions. Nowadays, everybody under the sun wants to say you have a mental illness if you show emotions. Emotions are natural, and you should validate them. All right, some healthy ways to manage stress: prayer, meditation, reflection, journaling, just writing out how you're feeling, how you're doing. Exercise, things like yoga, meditation, even things like essential oils, things like lavender, diffusing them throughout the house. Talking with friends and family. And going through and understanding that if your kids really need a lot of help, you might want to get some counseling or some support. First and foremost, you always focus on behaviorally. You always focus on supporting and encouraging. And you don't want to just go to a doctor that's all of a sudden going to put them on some sort of medication to help regulate their emotions. That's not ideal and it's not beneficial. Excuse me. In regards to exercise and physical activity are very easy for kids. Naturally, they just do it. It's great. Like we'll tell our kids to go outside and run, and all of a sudden they just go and they run. And I just think, could you imagine if I said that to a bunch of 30-year-olds? Go, be free. They'd be all slow and sit down. What do you want to do? Do you want to sit over there? Do you want to sit over here? Again, kids just go. They'll be up in the tree in 2 minutes. And like, again, that's a beautiful thing. But we also need to get into our inner kid ourselves and think, what did we really enjoy doing as kids? What do we enjoy doing now? And if you're not doing them, start doing them. If you want to dance, dance more. Make your significant other go and sign up for dance lessons. Go through and do something fun. Go out line dancing. Go do this. Go do an exercise class. Whatever it is, work towards activity. Try to incorporate an environment that you're getting enough physical activity. As our kids get older and older and they can go on walks and hikes and things like that, I'm super excited that we can easily say, all right, let's go for a hike. We're going to go hike 2-3 miles. Like getting them opportunities to be active wherever possible. Understanding certainly that different stages are able to do different things. So if you have a 2-year-old, they're going to have a limited amount of time that they can walk before you're going to be picking them up. So you need to be prepared to either hold them or a backpack or whatever it might be. Just make your house a movement-free zone. A lot of times people want their house to look like a model home. And what we have to understand here is set your environment up for a space that kids can be kids. You know, what we need to do is we need to recognize that is physical activity or some general movement better than having all these fancy decorations? And the answer most times would be yes. But kind of summing up lifestyle habits and intuitive eating is this quote here at the bottom. When you foster intuitive eating habits, offer health-promoting foods to your children or to yourself, promote healthy lifestyle habits of sleep, exercise, and stress reduction, you will be giving your child the gift of a lifetime. Talk about it. Like so many people are like, oh, I need to have a college fund for my kids. That's great, but this is more important than that. All right, this is an essential thing that you are giving them, an incredible gift, something that they will learn how to be healthy and be satisfied and be thankful and all those different things as well. All right, so I'm gonna have to wrap up here just to keep us closer to our time. But I do want to call out a few more things in the slides. The remainder of the slides go in a little bit to the feeding styles, talking about the different feeding styles. And I know all parents will be able to find where they are in this list, but just go through and spend some time when I send it out and reflect on that. Let me see here. Family meals are incredible. The benefit of a family meal is incredible. Nowadays, people are eating, window food, and they're eating their burger on their way to a baseball practice. And what we have to understand is that the family meal is a gift. It's something that we always need to make part of our day-to-day life, and really need to make sure that this is part of our life. This helps people check in to their eating, check into their social environment, and all the different things. Something here about firing the food police. Don't be a food police. I'll go to an event and people like hide their plate from me. And I'm like, I'm not judging your food. What are you eating? No, I'm just kidding. But like, seriously, like fire the food police. We don't have to be perfect. We really don't have to be perfect. Like just go through and try not to be a food police on yourself. And if you want a couple M&Ms, eat a couple M&Ms, all right? Try not to eat the entire bag. But like what you need to do is you need to go through and fire the food police, especially when it comes to your kids. Don't make things inherently good or bad. Like you don't ever want to say to a kid, that's a good boy, Billy. That's a bad girl, Julie. You don't want to do that, all right? You don't ever want to do that. They are not good and bad kids. They may have done a good thing or a bad thing, but what you do is you praise the effort or you address the thing they did. You don't want to give these labels, good and bad and horrible and this and that. It's doing a lot for their psyche that's not necessarily helping them. But keep in mind that we have to go through and focus on progress and not perfection, but we need to stop being food police. Even in ourselves, if we go through and we do something, you move forward. You think the people that are living to 100, like they're not beating themselves up if they have a cracker and it has oil in it. Like again, it's something that they're going through and they're focusing on what they do the majority of the time. As I mentioned, I did put in here some suggestions on different things that Dr. Yami lists for all the different chapters on different aspects of pregnancy. So there's some key points around how to eat intuitively and healthfully while pregnant. The newborn through 6 months of age, 6 months to a year. The two, I know that some of these might be interesting to you as well with the different babies at different stages. 1 year through 3 years, 4 years through 10 years, 11 years through 18 years, 18 to 40. No, I'm just kidding. When you go through and look at it, I do want to share one thing before we wrap up here. This is a concept that my wife started reading this book before me, and I hadn't read it, and she said, I have an idea that Dr. Yami said, and I said, what? I was like, are you kidding me? So here's the deal. It's called a play food drawer, and you could do this for yourself too. Get some of your goodies, get some of your snacks, create a little bin, write your name on it, or your kids' names, and basically what you do is you give them a little bit of play food. Don't call them treats or junk food or thing like that. Just call them play food. And what you do is when you go to the store, ask them, say, what are some play foods you want to have this month? So we started with weekly, and we tried it, and we learned that we needed to do it monthly. So I'll tell you why in a minute, but go through and give them a couple things. So what we do is we'll go through and we might have like an oatmeal cream pie, or we might have a bag of pretzels, or some peanut butter crackers, or, you know, a lollipop, right? Like something like that. They may be their 4 things for the month, but essentially they can eat them all whenever they want. They don't eat it before or during meals or right after they brush their teeth, but they can go through and pick them whenever they want to have them. So what's funny is 2 of our kids, the first thing we did, they had a whole, actually the first thing we did it mid-month, and we said, you have 2 weeks, and we loaded stuff in there, and we said, these are all you get for play foods for the rest of the month. And literally 2 of our kids were done in a day and a half. And they literally belly aching all in. And this is stuff that we normally don't even eat. Things that we got even had some dairy and some things. I told my wife, I said, next time, can we get some play foods that don't have dairy and don't have some of the other? But anyway, we had some of those things, and 2 of them dove in. They were all appetite, all just psychological. I want it, I need it, I crave it. And the other 2 were like more sensible. They were like, oh, I'm gonna eat that next week. And I'm gonna save this one for the following week. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's working on those 2. And then the other 2 were like binging. So here's the deal. The next time we did it, the ones that ate everything right away, they slowed down a little bit. And what they did was they went through and they said, all right, I'm going to do a little bit less here. And so instead of eating it all right away, I'm going to spread it out. So it's a unique concept, but what you're trying to help them do is understand that they don't have to be perfect and they can have some play food. So in your house, again, I wouldn't line my pantry with brownies, because brownies are like crack to me. And when I have them, I'm going to eat them till they're gone. But what I need to understand here is that I need to know, okay, I have a small amount of things and that's it. Okay. So it's just a neat concept that she recommends to some of her patients and families of her patients. Try to avoid food battles. Don't ever, ever, ever force a child to eat. Don't ever, ever force a child to eat. If you fix a plate and they don't want it, don't make them eat it. We used to struggle with this. We used to think, oh, well, they have to eat it. They're kids. They need it. They're not going to die from missing a meal. They're okay. All right. So if they ever don't want it, you can save it for them. You can put it in the refrigerator. Now, granted, you don't want a kid to not eat their dinner and then an hour later be saying, can I have some cookies? And can I have some ice cream? Say, I have your dinner for you. If you're hungry, you can eat your dinner. And we've tried that. And oftentimes their kids say, no, I'm okay. I'm not hungry. Because again, they wanted something else, but they didn't want the actual food that was served for them at that given time. All right, so make it a challenge, have some fun with it, but try to avoid food battles and forcing them. And then lastly, if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. And this goes for ourselves, this goes for our kids, no matter where we are. What we have to understand here is that we have to try again, and we have to try harder, and we have to put in all the effort we can. But again, we need to not sweat the small stuff. We weren't created to be perfect. We were people. We have free will. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have challenges. So what's really important here is that we don't give up and we keep staying focused on who we are, why we matter, because again, we matter. You matter. And we have to decide how we're going to live our life day in and day out. And what we do daily matters more than if we slip here or slip there. All right. So